Hi there, and welcome to part 3 of Teacher Use Microsoft Excel tutorial for Macs. In part 3, we're going to take a look at the data that we've now set up. We've now used filters and formulas to summarize, and the last step of that process is we're going to turn it into charts that will easily display your student achievement data in the areas that you want to focus on. So our objectives for this session are number 1, teachers will be able to select and manipulate appropriate data that they would like displayed in a chart. And that one's going to be a bit of a refresher from part 2 where we looked at filters and formulas. The second objective is that teachers will be able to create and format charts to most appropriately display their selected data. So we're going to start by taking a look at the data, and again we're going to use the same 3 sample sets that we've looked at in parts 1 and 2. We're then going to refresh on selecting and manipulating the data, and lastly we're going to go ahead and create charts. So the first thing we're going to do is select and manipulate our data, and like I mentioned, this is a bit of a review from part 2. As you'll recall, we have already used filters to narrow the data. In each of the sample sets of data, we selected 2 categories that we were going to use to narrow down the data. We then used the filters to break them down. We used formulas to summarize the data. And now we're going to move that selected data to a fresh spreadsheet. This part is optional. We can choose to do that, or we can skip that. So let's go ahead and take a look at our data example A. So this should look familiar. This is data A that we've been working with. We started by getting it set up with the student names on the left-hand side. We then added 2 columns over here, AN and AO. For this particular set of data, we chose to look at sex and race. So we added the labels for the columns, and then we went ahead and filled out those labels for each of our students in the class so that we had the sex of each student as well as the race of each student. We then decided that for this example, we were going to break it down by males and females. So we used our filters to look first at the male students. We then added a formula at the bottom where we found that the average student achievement for males in this particular class was 72% mastery. We then looked at females. We broke that down. We added the formula here at the bottom of overall percent correct, and we found that in this particular class of students, female students averaged 77% mastery of objectives. So now what we have here at the bottom is we have the data that we want to represent in a chart. Now what you can do is you can actually create the chart in this same spreadsheet, which I'm going to show you how to do in the next step, but you can also take this data, highlight it, we're going to copy it, and you can start fresh and create an entirely new spreadsheet. So if this is the spreadsheet you were using to collect student data throughout the year, you might want to save this as it is and then go ahead and open up a brand new one. We're going to paste the data here, the male and female data. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. And then we can begin creating the chart in this separate worksheet. Okay. Again, this is optional. If you want to work with the data in the original spreadsheet, you can go ahead and do the exact same thing I'm going to show you just right here in this spreadsheet. Okay. So now we've reviewed how we've manipulated and filtered our data in order to get some summaries of what we're looking at. The next step, we're actually going to turn this into a chart, which is a great visual representation for presenting data to others. The first step in making a chart is always to highlight the data that you want in the chart. For example, if we're looking at this spreadsheet here that has a lot of numbers and information in it, Excel doesn't know which part of this we want to represent in the chart. So for example, we see all these numbers here, which is the mastery per objective on this assessment. However, what we want to represent in the chart is the summary of the male and female percent mastery, which we've narrowed down right here. Okay, so in order to create this chart, we don't need all of this. So how we tell Excel exactly what information we want represented in that chart is to highlight that information. And you could do that here, or we've created it in a new spreadsheet here, and we're going to highlight that information. Okay. Once you've highlighted the simple data that you want represented in a chart, you're going to go to the menu bar, and you're going to select Insert. As you look down your menu options here, we're going to see one that says Chart. And again, this is a pretty simple process. Once you walk through it once, you're going to find that it's pretty user-friendly as you go back to it. Okay. You'll see here there are a bunch of different chart types. It starts with column, bar, line, pie. All the different chart types are good for different kinds of data that you want to represent. And all of the information we're going to be looking at, we're going to be comparing different groups, whether that's sex of students, so we're comparing male mastery to female mastery, or whether you're looking at race, where we're comparing the mastery of the different races in our class. Either way, the best graphs for this are either column or bar graphs, where we're showing direct comparison of 2 or more groups. Okay, we're going to use a column graph for this one. You'll see there's 7 options even within column graph. Mostly this is about how you want it to appear. They're all doing the same thing, it's just going to look a little bit different in each of them. Your simplest one is always going to be the first option. We see that it then turns 3D when you move down here. Some of them have different color options depending how much data you're showing. Ours is pretty simple, so we don't need a fancy graph. I'm going to start up here and show you the most simple one. Once you've selected the graph, you're just going to click on the next button. And now it's going to show you a very general example of what your data is going to look like right there. And we see this is what we want. We see it shows males here, females here. Along the y-axis, it's showing us the percent mastery on the assessment. Okay, so this looks great. We're going to go ahead and say next. Now it's going to ask you to title that chart. So I'm going to title it Student Achievement, Males versus Females. Again, this title is completely up to you. Category x-axis. Now here I can enter in a category and I can say student gender, student sex. However, this I think is optional because at the bottom you're going to see it already says male and female. So it's pretty obvious to folks who are reading it exactly what you're looking at there at the bottom. So I'm actually not going to include something there. Similarly, you see on the left, we already see the percentages. So it would be a bit redundant to put percent mastery. However, what could work here is if you want to specify what assessment you're looking at. Is this the end of grade test? Is this a particular final assessment that you've created? It could be helpful to indicate this is percent mastery on what assessment. Once you've chosen that, you're going to go next. Now you have 2 options here. You can create it. The first one is as a new sheet, and this is going to create a separate worksheet in this workbook of spreadsheets that will display just the chart. You can choose to do that. In this case, we've already created a new spreadsheet, so we're going to add it as an object in sheet 1, which is where we are right now. And when I click finish, it's going to go ahead and insert the chart right there. And you'll see that when you click on it, you can move it around, so you can move that chart wherever you want on that spreadsheet, and we see our basic chart. Now within this, you have the ability to format it once you've inserted it. So you can change the size of it by clicking here, dragging to make it smaller, make it larger. You can also change the title and edit it once you put it on here. So I can change it to just student achievement or whatever you want to add as you go. You can't add X and Y axis labels this way. You would have to create a new chart and input them in there. If you put something in there to begin with, then you'll be able to edit it just like the title. But if you don't choose to enter an X and Y axis label, you can't add them in once you've created it. Over here, series 1, we don't need that. We can just delete it, and then we have everything that we need. Now, an added benefit, you can choose to include it in the spreadsheet. One downside of Excel is that it's a little bit difficult to print. And if you're writing a long master's defense and you want to include these charts in it, it's very simple to just click on it and you can choose to copy it. And then we're going to go ahead and open up Microsoft Word, create a new document, and then here we're just going to go ahead and paste. And it's very easy to then move the chart that you created right over there into a Word document along with anything else that you're including. Okay, so that's example 1. I'm going to go ahead and close out that Word document. No need to save it. I would recommend if you're putting your chart and information into a new spreadsheet, you're saving that as you go. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and close out data set A.